Hello, guys and gals, me, Mutahar, and, continuing on the trend of this being one of the most wild, few days ever, I uploaded a video yesterday where I talked about aliens, and, it was a video that I recorded early in the day, had no idea about the actual situations that went down later, and then, of course, by the time I was reading the comments to that video later, it felt like the comment section for an entirely different video. Yesterday in the US, there was a whole assassination that happened. One of the most prominent conservative voices got completely assassinated. Really insane stuff to see. Obviously, it's not the focal point of even today's video, but I'm just somebody that condemns any form of violence. So, I felt like there were some people in the comments to yesterday's video who were like, man, you're a little insensitive. This happened. And I'm like, listen, I recorded things really early, didn't know what happened later in the day. So yeah, obviously I condemn any form of violence. Simple as that. If you thought for a second, oh man, that Muda guy on the internet, bet he just loves watching people get killed for whatever they say. You obviously don't know me as a person. And there was one person who's like, I watched you for 10 years. Unsub. Look, I'm glad YouTube has this feature where you can pull up a profile. The last profile was made 6 months ago. Okay, bro. I get it now. Simple as that. But ladies and gentlemen, times be a little tough these days. And one of the focal points of today's video that I want to touch upon is the censorship of the internet and why it just doesn't fucking work, okay? So the last few days has been kind of aggravating for me to see. Now, of course, aliens for me are a fun topic, but internet censorship is something that I think is never gonna stop, okay? The government will never try to stop censoring our free speech, okay? Now, and that means every government, by the way. So back in the day, back when the internet was made, I feel like a bunch of nerds were like, oh, let's send internet packets throughout the world. Let's send messages. And that day, Pandora's box opened, okay? Once human beings figured out, hey, we can just send each other messages, we can send data to each other at the speed of light, basically. And, that point, we were like, okay, we invented one of the greatest things that humanity has ever had, the internet, the ability for all human beings around the world to come together and share information at a pace never once thought before, okay? Back before the internet, we used to be sending each other fucking telegrams, smoke signals, calling each other, okay? Sending the motherfucking Pony Express across the goddamn, land, okay? Sending ships across the ocean. We still do that. But now we have the ability to write an email, okay, all the way from the middle of goddamn Nepal to goddamn Canada, and people can share within seconds. That is a beautiful invention. Now, the reason I brought up Nepal was literally about a week ago, their government decided to block all forms of social media, okay? So on September 4th, 2025, the Nepali government said that it's blocking basically most social media platforms. So sites like Facebook, sites like X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, YouTube, basically any website that's prominent enough that people in their, country use, were sent notices, right? And notices basically, listen, pal, okay? Unless you open up an office in our country and, you follow our rules, we're blocking you. So this is where it gets kind of scary. You might be like, what's the big deal, Muda, okay? So to give you an idea, right, if a country comes up to you and says, open up an office in our country, basically you got to hire somebody that's willing to die on the sword for you if you don't follow every single rule in the country. And the reason why countries do this is so that you are forced to follow their laws. Now, there's a lot of countries in the world, I think countries like India, for instance, where if they want something banned off social media, they can just usually go to the office in their country and pressure the social media service from there. And even if these services like to be free speech, ultimately on a court order or because the government presses them hard enough and steps into their meal ticket, that's when speech starts getting banned. Now, obviously, Nepal and India have some pretty big differences between each other, okay? India is a pretty huge country. Nepal is a modest country, okay? I don't want to say that they're small or anything, but they don't have that fucking pull. They don't have that clout. They don't got that clout like some of the other big countries do, okay? When the UK starts pushing their clout onto the world, it's fucking annoying because you can't ignore it. But for a country like Nepal, every single one of these social media services was given that order, and they were just like, oh, thanks for the toilet paper, pal, let me wipe my ass. So obviously the Nepalese were like, okay, we'll go to our internet service provider, we'll tell them, all right, you got to block access to YouTube, everyone that didn't agree with us. And of course, that's when shit hit the fan. So basically, a lot of people in their government was even criticizing the bills, right? Which weren't even debated at the time in their parliament. And they were like, listen, I think you just want the internet banned or the internet censored because you want to censor things and you want to punish your opponents who are fighting the established politicians in the country, which is usually the fucking case, okay? The problem is, as you can imagine, internet censorship. It's usually done for reasons where the government wants you to not talk about something that is sensitive. And obviously, this moment in time, people in Nepal started getting really mad. They were like, listen, we're Gen Z. We're fucking pissed. They went out rioting on the motherfucking streets. And these riots got pretty goddamn violent. 19 people clashed with the police and unfortunately had died. So yeah, instead of unbanning social media services, the law enforcement of Nepal started fighting back with live ammunition against their protesters, people that just wanted to have access to the internet so they can browse and talk to people freely, consume the information and news about the world without their government preventing them from having fucking basic access to information, which, might I remind you, we as human beings don't get along on a lot of things, but at least we get along when it comes to detailing human rights. The right to privacy, the right to free expression, the right to these basic freedoms is something that, if you live where I live in North America, people take this shit for granted all the time. And I have to constantly remind people that there are parts of the world where, politicians never change, okay? It's always like the same motherfucker running the country for 30 fucking years. And even though they got elections in that country, it's so hard to get these despots overthrown because they control every single means of propaganda. It's so difficult to educate people. It's so difficult to spread real information. If you're somebody that's an actual marginalized, person, not somebody that's pretending to be super marginalized for brownie points, you are actually in danger in parts of the world, right? Even as developed as countries can be, there are still people that face serious discrimination and struggles, and the internet is their last bastion of freedom, and that gets fucking taken away. I don't want to get into just Canada, for instance, but what's wild is even in Canada, we still have some level of fucking censorship. So for instance, if you go to Facebook and just look at CBC News, this is one of Canada's largest news organizations. You might be like, whoa, why the fuck aren't they posting, Muda? They got 3 million followers. Dog, if I hit F5, that is absolutely not a bug. Because of Canada's online news act, Facebook has just decided, yeah, we're going to get rid of all form of news commentary because I guess they weren't paying up their fair share or whatever. But to me, anytime I see this, I kind of look at it as sort of a soft censorship. It's crazy to think that being in Canada, you should have access to free and open information. But because laws exist, they basically prevent some of the most popular social media services like Facebook, like Google, or whatever, to give us the information that honestly, at the end of the day, we just fucking crave. So here it is. I refreshed the page. I've got myself connected to the Etats Unis, okay? Gotta rep my French a little bit here. And you can see, bro, the Americans can see what the fuck is happening in Canada, except the fucking Canadians. The Canadians are unable to see what's going on in their own country through their own news service, simply because they're hosting it on a fucking internet forum, internet page that belongs to the US. It's just insane how overly regulated the internet's gotten. And unfortunately, as much as I dislike it, and millions of people dislike this shit, we just can't say anything about it. We can't fight the government. You can make 1 million petitions, but you will not win, okay? They will not accept it. They might acknowledge that you want things to change, but they will not change things. But it doesn't stop over there. One of the people, the protesters, Nimi Sherpa, who is 19 years old, by the way, an actual child at this point, and I'm saying child because I'm in my 30s now, okay? To me, somebody who's not even 20 is like a fucking baby to me, all right? They don't have harsh feelings towards the cops of this situation. They were doing their duties by following orders, which, again, shooting a 19-year-old, Jesus Christ. But I am angry and enraged to the ones who gave those orders. Now that the fire has already started, I believe it must continue until we achieve true freedom. And it is true, right? A lot of these governments are trying to wrestle and control the power that they have by controlling the flow of information and communication that people genuinely have. And look, I'm not here to talk about this in the most doomy, gloomy way imaginable. There are ways, if you live in countries like this, to fight back and get some of your freedoms, okay? I really think we're at a time where the ability to achieve real internet anonymity is so important. Because every country, and I brought up India, Canada, and a lot of these countries as examples because every country is really pushing for their own form of censorship, right? Even countries as free as the United States have talked about banning services like TikTok, have mulled with that idea. And I'm not okay with it. While I don't like TikTok and I don't like TMU, I think that if you live in a place where the internet is supposed to be free, or free expression is a virtue that we hold near and dear to us, you should be allowed to use whatever service you want. A lot of these TikTok bans happened not because, TikTok was a grave danger. It was because for a long time, the United States is a absolute leader in the tech industry, right? So all the social media services are in the United States. They have the ability to effectively control the algorithms that the rest of the world sees. And that's not okay in many ways. You could probably extrapolate that and think, yeah, you could rig elections. You could do something fucked up by manipulating the algorithm of certain countries, which is a real issue that, politicians have brought up. But the one time that TikTok, a company from China, came up and launched their service internationally, because this service started to become as big as many of those US social media services, for that moment, America was like, yeah, maybe it's okay if we do it, but let's start banning all the other people that achieve similar gains in this industry. You can sort of see that it's not about protecting you, it's about protecting the people at the top and that level of control that the government actually has kind of become pretty grown to. And I don't care what the government wants, I just care about you, the person. I just care about us and our freedoms as we live day to day. So for a lot of you people out there, right, I always shill Tor, and I don't shill it for no reason. I've been browsing the dank web for a long time. And if you look at this graph, you can see that relays have slowly increased as time has gone on. Bridges to those relays have grown, maybe stagnated and dropped, but serve as great ways for people to access Tor. Now, the reason why I talk about Tor so much is not necessarily for you to access the Onion services, but for you to access the internet in a way that anonymizes you from the governments that, hold you hostage. So for instance, if I was Canadian and I couldn't access the news agencies through Facebook, God forbid, I can always go to Facebook's Onion link using Tor and bypass all the government censorship. Not saying that I would even use Facebook, but you get the idea. You can use it for pretty much any website out there. Now, obviously, I think for governments who are already looking at VPNs in a shitty manner, I think the next stage is trying to probably block Tor, which Tor has been blocked in certain countries. And it's one of the reasons why they will teach you how to set up relays and bridges. And it's really not difficult for you to set up an exit relay. You can follow all of these commands. And if you have some internet expertise, you can use any of these operating systems to install a program known as Unbound, which allows you to contribute to the actual relay. Now, I don't recommend you do this simply because, again, Tor consists of not just anonymized content, but also illegal content. There's many places where I think legally it is not allowed for you to host Tor relays. And again, consult with your lawyer before you try any of this shit. But even when it comes to messages, services like Signal, which I use on a daily basis to communicate with my friends, not just because it's privacy focused, but just because we needed something cross-platform. Using Signal, you can actually utilize something known as the Signal TLS proxy, and setting it up is really simple. Install Docker, which you can do on any of the major operating systems, clone the repository simply by going to, again, their code here, hitting the code, copying that to clipboard, and then just doing git clone, and then of course entering that in. I've already cloned it. And of course, then you can just direct yourself to that by going cd, which is signal, change directory. And then of course, following their commands, you can init certificate, as long as you have a host name, provided something valid, and then just run this command, and you will provide the world with its own TLS proxy. So for any user that's out in the world where Signal is banned, they can use your proxy to bypass it. Now, of course, internet censorship is sort of escalated. Just a few days ago, there was leaked files that came out that a Chinese company known as Gigi Networks was selling one of their flagship products, Tianzhu Secure Gateway, to other parts of the world, where again, it's the Chinese Great Firewall, which is designed to keep us out from talking to our Chinese friends in their country and vice versa, and they're selling this to other countries for the express purposes of internet censorship and controlling their populations, which is wrong. It shouldn't be happening, and this shit should be sanctioned no matter where you go. And that's why I talked about Tor, and I talked about Signal, and I talked about VPNs, because ultimately you can't ban the internet. You can't ban these services. You're not able to do it. You can make things difficult, and eventually the goal is to make it so difficult for people that accessing free information is going to be more of a nuisance, maybe a legal nuisance. But I want people, no matter how technically illiterate you are, to install Tor browser on your Android phone before Google considers it to be unsafe at some point down the road, or just figure out how to access Tor to begin with. Go download the browser. Browse the internet freely as it used to be. Download applications like Signal, which allow you to have some level of actual protection for your communications. Use decentralized social media services. If you feel that X or like Facebook or a lot of these services are catering too much to governments because they have to, utilizing decentralized social media services like Dread allow you to communicate with people where you do not have to necessarily deal with the internet censorship. You can get access to information even if the government considers that to be too dangerous. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to talk about this because to me, this shit is really important, okay? This is what I'm most passionate about, okay? And it's not because, oh, Moody, you have something to hide, or let the government have access to all your information. No, it's more that I care about the freedom of the internet being preserved, okay? Look, I grew up using, when I was growing up as a kid, going to the internet and typing in any fucking address.com was a thing. You could go to these websites, you could do whatever the fuck you wanted, you could get access to all kinds of information, even if that information was wrong, even if that information was, you know, too controversial, whatever. You still had the freedom to access that information. You still had the free choice to go there. I think in the next 10 years, given how, you know, a lot of these companies are kind of fucking around with our operating systems and computers and everything, they're going to a point where installing an application that's not on a whitelist, kids 20 years from now might have to look at operating systems and ask the question. It's like you used to be able to install apps whenever you wanted without it being on a government approved list or a tech approved list. Oh, you could access any website you wanted without like the government jumping into the browser or like the IP or ISP layer and like completely disabling information. These are things that if you don't fight back now, if you don't figure out how to bypass the government's censorship or tech censorship in general, then you will lose access to a free part of the internet. The internet will become a segregated place where people are isolated. We will turn a technology that we once used to connect human beings together for, you know, whatever it was worth, into a situation where humans are now once again segregated, and really the people at the top control exactly what it is that we get to consume. Whether that matters to you, I don't know. But it matters to me, and I feel like it's worth talking about. So ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it or dislike it. I am out.